not my favorite Neil Gaiman, actually.
Really?
I struggled
love
with
that
that
one.
But he's written like Coraline and Stardust and, you know, American Gods are all books that I just, you know, gobbled up. Yep.
I was really looking forward to Norse mythology, and I was thinking about doing that for my mythology read harder.
That's what I am doing it for.
Nice.
I was kind of thinking that Marlon James one might qualify though.
Yeah. So it's mythology inspired. I did just buy this book today.
Black Leopard, Red Wolf.
Yes, and he sort of jokingly described it as an African Game of Thrones, but I was like, yep, that's all I need. Thank you very much. Yeah, I will be buying that immediately.
So I actually read his A History of Seven Killings.
I have it over there, and I haven't read it yet.
Is that good?
So good. The way he writes characters is amazing. Like, fully developed, like, you fully feel them. And, like, there are so many characters in A History of Seven Killings. I don't expect these books to be anything really alike. They're kind of completely different genres. And I think he even says that himself, you know, like, these are very different kinds of books.
That's actually amazing, though.
Yeah, like, that you can, like, cross over like that. But I fully expect it to be amazing. Like, and it's this, you know, sort of fantasy epic inspired by, like, African folklore and stuff. So I'm expecting probably a shit ton of characters in that, too. And as richly as he writes characters, I'm just really excited for it.
So Neil Gaiman wrote a glowing review, which is on the back of the book, and said it was like just as thought out and like a complete world as a Tolkien. And I have been like thirsty for a new fantasy. Like, I'm on the Game of Thrones lull. I don't have a new season. I don't have a new book. We're at the end of Patrick Rothfuss, like Name of the Wind, and like there's lots of YAs I could pick up, and I don't mean to sound like diminishing, but I want like a really good writer to write me a new fantasy series. And then he did. He delivered. Yeah. And it's really, I'm so excited to have this like twist of it being a like reimagined Africa, and yeah, I'm super pumped.
I'm looking forward to borrowing that later.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Also, Michael B. Jordan has already optioned it's already happening.
Oh,
I think I tweeted that today, and I was like, as a producer too, and I was just like, that was fast. It just came out.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so super exciting.
And it's just something that you don't ever, which actually kind of segues into what I had just finished for when I'm on my way to my 2019 Book Riot Read Harder. But the thing about that book that's really exciting is, you know, it's set in Africa, but it's this fantasy epic. Normally when we come across these fantasies, they're sort of this, like, most of the time, like, English sort of feel to them.
Medieval Europe.
Yeah, medieval Europe. And that's where you're kind of stuck. So it kind of repeat some of the same things over and over again. So it's something new and different kind of spin on the normal fantasies that you might come across. Which I'm reading the Broken Earth trilogy. The last one of which will qualify for one of my read harder challenges. But the first one, the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin, starts off, and I loved it. I was a little hesitant at first because, so I guess why it fits is most of those characters are, you know, black characters, and the like white characters are kind of like on the marginal side. So kind of like spins things on its head, where, you know, most of the characters you come across are characters of color, and like that's the normal. So that's an interesting take on it. But it's just something that you don't get to come across a lot. So it's kind of like refreshing to dive into a world that's completely different from one that I'm used to reading about. But I was a little hesitant jumping into it because reading like the various previews and stuff, it's like this fantasy epic, and then post-apocalyptic sort of time frame in this fantasy world. And then you got like these people that have magical, like geologically based powers. And you're like, wow, that sounds cool, but it's really, really awesome. They kind of like suss out all of the like energy from the earth and can, you know, still like calm volcanoes, but they can also like create earthquakes. So
you're saying Storm, my favorite X-Men.
Sort of.
And there's a whole series about it.
Sort of, yeah.
You've now sold me.
More on the lines of like Magneto, like how he can, you know, reach into the core of the earth.
Not Storm.
No.
Okay.
Not quite as stormy, more Magneto-y, but all still amazing. And she's really great at the like political and social like storytellings too, because you read about this fantasy world, but they have so much that ties back to like, you know, our history as a nation. I mean, they have like racism, they deal with like slavery throughout, prejudice, and they're all kind of dealing and facing that too. So while I think you go to fantasy to escape some of these things from your normal everyday life, like it's there in this, but it's not in the normal way that we see it, because just the whole face of the novel, like, is quite literally different than most of the other fantasies you're ever coming across. So it was a refreshing take, and I really like it, and I'm really pumped to get into the rest of the trilogy.
Nice.
I like her work a lot.
Yeah.
I
Have you
haven't
read
read
this
anything.
series? Or?
I've not read this. I've read her very first series ever, her very first book. The name escapes me. But I remember picking up when I was in grad school and looking at the back cover and seeing that she was also in grad school. Like she was working on her doctorate in psychology or something like that.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, holy shit. Like,
Yeah.
how can you write
Have
a
the
dissertation and write this phenomenal fantasy? It was a trilogy, so yeah.
One of the things I'm really excited to read is for the book written by a woman in translation or translated by a woman. I actually saw in the bookstore today when I was there, Human Acts by Han Kang, who wrote The Vegetarian, which was one of my absolute, probably like the year I read it, which was 2 years ago, my favorite book I read that year. It was so beautiful and well done and just uncomfortable in a good way. I can't recommend that enough. And it won the Man Booker for the same year as A Brief History of Southern Killings, because if you remember, we argued about it. Yeah. And it was the one foreign language Man Booker in translation has a different prize. They both won. We were both right.
Okay.
It was like a crazy
the nerdiest argument,
and it was like just an intense debate. You know, I was like, no, like this book won. She's like, no, this one won. And later on, researching, it was like we were both a little right,
and we're both nerds. But yeah, it's really well done. So I want to read another of her books. If you've ever read The Edible Woman by Margaret Atwood, which was her first novel, which I like, okay, but it's definitely, it was a debut novel, you know, kind of thing, and it was written in the 70s, so there's some things outdated, but it's like, it does what that book tried to do, but better, in my opinion.
Well, what is Human Acts about?
I haven't actually looked into this one. I'm just obsessed with her writing, and I didn't know she had another book until recently.
Okay, so you're...
You know, sometimes one of my favorite things to do is to pick up a book that I either have like on strong recommendation from somebody, or by like an author that I really like, and just start reading it. Like I don't even read the back cover or anything. So
just go for it.
So it's a fun journey, you know. Like I'm like 20 pages in, and people are like, "Oh, what's that about?" I'm like, "I have no idea." Like it's interesting though. I'm finding out. So
I do not like to read more than like half a paragraph of the back cover. I don't like any kind of. I don't like too much.
Don't
but
give too much away.
Give me a sense of like how does this book feel, and like who's the protagonist, and you know, just maybe a snippet about the problem. Maybe not even that.
Right.
I just want to know that. Anything more?
Yeah.
I've
definitely like, you know, plugged my ears and done the like la 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 la, like you're giving things away before to Aubrey when she's trying to like she's like describe
the basic ass premise.
It is the like paragraph that's on the back, and I was just like, I haven't read that part.
I'm with you.
It's
I like
so
the surprise. Funny. It's, you know, a journey.
Yep.
It's fun.
What else have you read?
This year?
Yeah.
I read Hannah versus the Tree. And I also read Cooking on a Bootstrap, which is a cookbook. But I help facilitate a queer cookbook club, and so I did actually read it cover to cover.
Oh.
And it met my...
How was reading a cookbook cover to cover?
I think it's actually good. I realize that I don't do it very much, and reading all the there's always like a chapter on like what staples to have in your pantry and some like cooking basics, and I think it's really good to do that. This particular cookbook by Jack Monroe is she's queer, she's neurodiverse, so that meant actually one of the categories for Read Harder, which was something by a neurodiverse author. So it's a good reminder of like some of the kitchen essentials that we forget, or other people's kitchen essentials are different than yours. So that was actually pretty helpful. I didn't love the cookbook itself. It's focused on like frozen foods and tin cans, which is meant to like really intentionally be accessible. Just not my usual way of cooking. But I tried it. I did it. I was
gonna say, so you didn't also make every meal?
I did not make it. No, but I had 13 of the meals at the cookbook club.
Okay,
so
all right.
But I did read through all of the ingredient lists for every single. The other book I read was Hannah versus the Tree, and I bought it strictly because it had a wolf on the cover and a nice gradient background. So I'm a sucker for both of those things. It was short and kind of it was like not exactly my cup of tea, but I definitely get why folks might like it. It's got a sort of Greek tragedy epic feel to it. So it was weird.
I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I can lend it to you.
Yeah.
It's like sort of Greek tragedy with a little bit of like, I don't know, not quite Game of Thrones, like family, political dramas, but it's I don't know how to, it's I don't even know how to describe it, but the text is very high level in a lot of ways, and things felt a little like, the narrative was sort of hard to pin down for me. I think I'm not smart enough.
I guess that's not true.
Yeah. You read a book and you're like, this book is not for people like me.
I always just go with, I'm not patient enough.
There we go. There we go. Yeah.
More generous.
Not patient enough for this. Like,
but a friend of mine who is reads very highbrow literature told me that it was a beautiful book. So maybe take her word over mine.
Okay. The last one that I'm really looking forward to reading is You Know You Want This by Kristen Rupinian, who wrote Cat Person, which went viral in the New Yorker. It was post like the Harvey Weinstein. It was the second most read thing besides the Weinstein Expo that they put that year. And it was just sort of this like post Me Too, really relatable. She's like a college kid, but just talking about having sex with someone you didn't want to have sex with. And it was just really well done and kind of perfect for the moment. And so this is her collection of short stories. And it looks really good. And I'm very excited to read it.
Sounds very intense.
I recommend that New Yorker story if you haven't read it, Cat Person.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, I feel like after we just got done talking about, how I like to just jump into books, I feel like this is not going to be a very good plug, but one of the ones I just started and I'm also excited about, it's called The Feather Thief by Kirk Wallace Johnson. I'm actually reading that for one of my Book Riot challenges. It's a non-violent true crime. Fits in that category. So it's called The Feather Thief. It's about this guy who steals a bunch of dead birds from the British National History Museum.
Okay.
And that's pretty much all I know so far, because I haven't read too much else about it. But I'm just like, I'm intrigued because I need to know why he stole all of these bird specimens. Like, who does that and why? And then it's supposed to get crazier from there. Like, that's what this guy steals these dead birds, and then like that's not even the most like insane part. So apparently it's gonna like go off the deep end somewhere. So I'm excited to find out where.
You'll have to
Okay.
let us know. I just
Yeah.
looked it up on Goodreads, and one of the questions about it